Tonight on Meet Your Double Feature. After being separated at birth, twins Alex and Chad reunite to track down the men that murdered their parents. Jean-Claude Van Damme and Jean-Claude Van Damme star in Double Impact. Then, after being left for dead on a distant planet, Sergeant Todd 3465 must defend his new home against the men that cast him out. Kurt Russell stars in Soldier. It's an action-packed double feature, and it starts right now.
All right, Frank, welcome back. Episode 4 of Meet Your Double Feature. How you doing today?
I'm good. Excited for episode 4.
This guy, he's always excited. One of these days,
I am
just
actually,
hear...
though.
Oh, you actually are? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want that to feel like you had to be, because you could tell me. Like, if we start and you're like, I'm just having the worst day, I'd be like, all right.
Yeah, then we just skip the whole episode.
Yeah, microphone's down, heart to heart. Anyway, welcome back to the show. We have 2 more exciting movies to review for you today, and I don't know if we need much preamble. I think we can get right into it. I think I go first today, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first movie on the docket. Again, if you caught the end of our previous episode, you'll already know what this is. But Frank, you selected for me to watch 1991's Double Impact, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and, get this, Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Oh yeah, which is exactly why I picked it. This was like a pick that I was jealous of because I wanted to watch this movie, but I was like, this will be a good one for you.
Yeah, because we both like Jean-Claude Van Damme. We've seen several of his movies each, but this one just never popped up for either one of us before now.
Dude, I love Jean-Claude Van Damme. He's just such an interesting, I don't know, like action movie star. He's very unique. So I am excited to hear your thoughts on this one.
He is unique. I do think that a lot of his movies have similar traits. Like, he must have some level of input over the movies he was working on in the 80s and 90s, because a lot of them have similar elements. And a lot of that pops up here, but what does make it stand out is that unlike most of his movies, he is forced to play characters. I think like a lot of action stars, and especially martial arts action stars, they usually just kind of play as themselves, but because, as the premise will explain, he's playing himself and his own twin brother, he has to actually like play 2 distinct roles, and that is genuinely a challenge for someone who I would not say is like a classically trained actor by any means.
No. I mean, how does he do, though?
Well, to get right into it, the premise for Double Impact is about what you would expect. I think going into the movie, I wasn't, looking for any sort of genuine emotional drama. I think if you hear that premise, it's Jean-Claude Van Damme playing 2 twins. The main 2 things you would want to see is him fighting himself, which we do get, and then the 2 twins fighting together, which we do get. So it's not like it doesn't deliver on the premise, but the way we get to it is genuinely pretty amusing right off the bat.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I actually didn't expect them to fight each other, but I'm glad that
was
they
my
did.
first thought. That was my first thought, was like, because you and I both know, because we've seen stuff from this era, that a movie from the 90s about 2 characters played by one actor is we're going to get a lot of weird cinematography. We're going to get shots that are like static frames split down the middle with one take on the left of the screen and one on the right, and they're going to try to create this illusion that they're having a conversation when we know it was just filmed separately. And I just the whole time was like, this has to end with him fighting himself, and I'm so curious how they're going to do that. But to just kind of set the board here, the premise of the movie is that Jean-Claude Van Damme plays 2 twins who were the sons of some kind of British businessman working in Hong Kong. Their parents are both assassinated when they are like newborn babies. There's some sort of business deal going on, and the guy who was working with their father betrays him. Basically has like a Batman moment where like the parents get gunned down in front of the 2 baby twins, and then the kids survive because they're rescued by their father's like right-hand man security guard. But due to a set of circumstances, they grow up separately. One of the twins is rescued by the security guard and goes back to America, and the other one inexplicably is left behind at like a French orphanage in Hong Kong and has to grow up as like a criminal living on the streets.
I was going to ask, because you were saying like British father, Hong Kong, and I was like, where's Jean-Claude's accent come into this?
Yes, this was my first note. Every Jean-Claude Van Damme movie shies away from the fact that the man is from Belgium.
It is a thick accent.
They always try to come up with some convoluted scheme to explain why he's actually French. And I did look up that, I mean, French is one of the primary languages spoken in Belgium, but the accent is different. And it's so obvious. But for some reason, all of his movies, A, feel the need to explain in the first place why he has an accent. And B, it never makes any sense. Like, the one twin, when the movie, like, fast forwards and we see them played by Jean-Claude, he's in, like, Florida, but they sneak in a line that he spent most of his childhood in France to explain the accent. But then the other twin spent his whole life in Hong Kong, and the only thing we have to go on is that the orphanage he was dropped off at was run by, like, a French nun. And it's like, okay, so they came out sounding the same?
What a coincidence.
Yeah, it's so strange. Like, I don't think anybody needed these explanations. Like, if you watched an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie in the 80s or 90s, like, he's famously an Austrian actor who has a similarly, like, thick accent. I don't think he often tries to explain where he's from. He's just like, I'm the Terminator. And they're like, okay.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Even as a machine, they don't try and explain his accent.
There's no reason to spend any time on it, but this movie got too in its own head about it. Because again, their parents, they're either British or Australian. I couldn't exactly tell. But why bother? We don't need this. It's an action movie. No one's going to be holding it to that kind of standard for, like, logical consistency. But regardless, that's our premise. The two twins, they grow up apart, not knowing that the other one exists. One of them grows up in the care of their father's, like, right-hand man, essentially Alfred from Batman. Like, that's kind of the dynamic we have here. Except if Alfred was, like, just kind of lame in almost every aspect.
Okay.
Because he's shown to be, like, a competent security guy who ends up saving the two twins from being murdered on the night that their parents were killed. And he, like, shoots out a couple of the bad guys and runs off. But then when we flash forward to the present, he's just this, like, balding karate / aerobics instructor working with one of the two Jean-Claudes. And you're like, oh, okay, this is our guy. He's also named Frank, which I thought was funny.
Oh, wait, / aerobics? Is he teaching aerobics classes?
I don't think he teaches aerobics, but Jean-Claude supposedly does both because that's how we're introduced to our Americanized Jean-Claude twin. I guess this is another point in my notes, but the two names given to the twins are Alex and Chad. And ironically, the one who's, like, super lame and not cool he's Chad.
Oh, okay. They're trying to subvert the stereotype that goes with that name.
I think it was probably that it didn't exist yet, but I did find that funny that it's like, it kind of felt like the Chad Jean-Claude versus the Virgin Jean-Claude meme, but instead, like, Chad is the lame one. But his introduction as an adult character is that he is teaching an aerobics class, and like in all Jean-Claude movies, we spend a lot of time, like, sexualizing him for some reason. Like, it's a room full of women in, like, 80s Pilates outfit, but, like, the frame is just centered on Jean-Claude Van Damme's butt while he's doing the splits. And I'm like, okay, this is, like, contractual? Why is this in all of his movies?
Oh, I think that's a Jean-Claude thing. I think he wants that in his movies.
That's what I mean. There's these beats that we hit in almost all of his films that I have seen, and this one was no exception right off the bat. But he gets interrupted from teaching his aerobics class by Frank, who he calls his uncle, who raised him. And he says, like, hey, can you step in and teach the karate class? I got to go talk to this guy. And then he walks over and basically just demonstrates that he also knows karate.
I'm sorry, I was just picturing them like they're doing like an aerobics class, and then he brings Frank in and he just starts like spin kicking these people that are just there to like stretch.
No, yeah, he's not like, this is now a karate class.
He's like, it's karate class now.
Yeah. That'd be really funny. But no, alas, he goes to a separate room and tries to teach karate, and they basically just want to show you off the bat that Jean-Claude is like a trained martial arts guy. He does some cool kicks. But the plot basically kicks off right after that, because he goes into his Uncle Frank's office and he says, like, hey, what's the deal? And his uncle says, we need to go to Hong Kong. And he won't tell him why, but the viewer has already shown that they've located his twin brother, who presumably the uncle has been searching for this whole time, but it's never really made all that clear. But the two of them go to Hong Kong, and then the first act of the movie is basically like a short-lived mistaken identity comedy bit where, like, he goes into town in Hong Kong and everybody there is either like acting like they're afraid of him or giving him money or all this other stuff or just giving him a lot of attention. And so Chad, our nice boy Jean-Claude, is like, wow, this is a weird place, huh? But then it goes sour because he bumps into his twin's girlfriend, and they like she's about to try to like hook up with him, but then the other twin shows up and basically like immediately headbutts this man in the face.
As you do. See somebody
As
that
you
looks
do.
just like you trying to steal your girlfriend, you gotta headbutt him.
Gotta headbutt him. And as we'll see, that's actually one of the heel Jean-Claude's signature moves. They try to differentiate how they fight, and the main thing about Alex, the kind of like rugged one, is that he headbutts people a lot.
It's a dirty tactic, I guess.
It is a dirty tactic. He also snaps several people's necks, but we'll get into that. The premise from there, again, you would assume with how the story began that we would really drag out this part where there's two of the same guy in town and people keep mistaking one for the other and they haven't even run into each other yet. But all of that is introduced and then resolved in like 3 or 4 minutes of screen time. And for the rest of the movie, we have almost no capitalization on that idea. Like they don't really successfully trick anybody into thinking they have the wrong one or anything like that. It's all just a setup so that they can be like at odds with each other when they first meet.
Do they, like prior to this, did they know the other one existed?
I believe they did not. There's the uncle Frank has to explain to both of them that they're brothers and that he knows what happened to their parents because he happened to see that the person who ordered the hit on them was their business partner on this deal they were closing when the movie opens in the flashback. So he's aware that there's these two businessmen, one of whom is also British and one of whom I think is Hong Kong based, that they just need to get revenge on because they are responsible for getting their parents killed. And so he pulls them both together and basically just tells them to go on like a murder revenge mission, which they eventually do.
He tells them to do this? He says, you gotta
Yeah,
go.
it's not really clear. Like their plan is not like we need to expose them and get them sent to jail. It's kind of just we need to dismantle their illegal operations. And by the end of the movie, it's like we're going to, murder them. So it's not very complicated, which I suppose is fine for this kind of story.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So once we get both Jean-Claudes together, obviously this is where the movie picks up, but also where some of its limitations begin. Because as, again, we've seen, a movie from the 1990s does not have very complicated technology to convince you that there's two Jean-Claudes on the screen at the same time. So we either get the aforementioned, like, split down the middle shot of them acting opposite, probably a stand-in and trying to match up the eye lines and such. Or we do, like, two people are on screen, but one of them is obviously a body double and they're just not showing their face,
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of over the shoulders. Yeah, exactly like you said.
Over the shoulders, or even just kind of shooting it like shot reverse shots so that you see one guy's face and then you see the other person's reaction. They use every trick that they had available to them for the time. And I do think that they didn't shy away from it too much. They tried their best to create opportunities to actually put both of their faces on screen at once. And so they get credit for that. I'm sure that's really complicated and they did their best, but it does, to a modern viewer, look very silly.
Yeah, I mean, especially of that era, there was, like, I think we mentioned Parent Trap last week when we were introducing this movie. And, like, that's like a good example. I mean, obviously it's not perfect throughout the whole film, but that's a good example from something of a similar era that did that really well. But yeah, there's way more examples of it not looking as good as that.
Again, I think the most relevant thing that it reminded me of is that episode of Power Rangers where they make White Ranger Tommy fight evil Green Ranger Tommy, and they do that like gag of them kind of like staring each other down, and it just looks a bit funny because again they took someone who's not much of an actor and were like, play two versions of yourself, and they were like,
yeah, but at least in that they could cover them up in the suits later too, because then they could
exactly.
Just have two different...
So that was my thinking the whole time, because as the movie wore on, I was like, I don't think we are going to get this fight scene between the two Jean-Claudes. I might have given them too much credit that they would even attempt it.
I thought they fought right away. I thought he headbutted him and then they just started duking it out.
Not quite. So the headbutt is the classic cinema, like, knocked out transition that never makes any sense, where he somehow passed out for like several hours and then woke up and was just like not, brain dead.
Yeah. There's something actually foreshadowing something similar happens in Soldier. So we'll get to that later too.
Okay. Fantastic. So anyway, plot-wise, there's not a lot that you really need to recap for this movie. It's a martial arts action movie featuring a lot of punching and kicking and shooting people with guns. It's exactly what you would expect. They give themselves a couple of set pieces to do so. But the plot generally is that the two brothers do try to essentially uncover the criminal operations of these people who are responsible for their parents' death. And part of their plan to do so is that Alex, the rugged one from Hong Kong, his girlfriend is actually working, coincidentally, for one of these two businessmen already. And so she has to try to uncover some concrete proof that what Uncle Frank is saying is correct. And then by the end, she naturally gets captured, and so does Uncle Frank, and they have to go save them both. And we get, because there's two business people villains, we kind of get, two separate conclusions with each twin. And that's about it. So plot-wise, not a lot to break down. But I do think where the movie deserves a lot of focus is on how they characterize these two performances from Jean-Claude Van Damme. Because you would assume he's not necessarily going to be able to play two convincingly different characters, but he almost does. I think he almost gets it.
Almost.
Just in the sense that what's on the page helps him out. So Chad, the American twin, he is supposed to be a naive, boisterous kind of ladies' man in his 20s who is in over his head with all of these illegal crime operations and has to kind of mature a bit to get his head in the game and get involved enough to actually help save the day at the end. Whereas Alex, the evil twin, essentially, his whole thing is that he literally is an illegal smuggler. He's selling people foreign imported cars and cigarettes and stuff. So he's a little bit more hard-nosed. But he gets the interesting caveat that he has a girlfriend and actually cares very much about this person. They don't undercut that by making him a jerk to her or anything. A lot of the movie is driven by the fact that Alex genuinely loves his girlfriend and is trying to keep her safe.
I was going to say, this is, I don't know when this game came out, but this is basically the plot of Double Dragon, too.
It is. It's very similar to the plot of Double Dragon, which is funny because it actually has one of the same shortcomings as the movie adaptation of Double Dragon. Because I saw that not that long ago, too. And it's in a similar boat where they have a movie about martial arts action. But rather than choreograph interesting martial arts sequences, they kind of just throw the occasional kick that immediately takes someone down and then go back to shooting their guns. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's a shame, because what's his name? Bolo Young is in this movie as well, right?
Bolo Young is in this movie, who people would remember as the villain from Bloodsport, which is probably Jean-Claude's most famous film. It is a reunion of those two, and we do get another fight between those two. Bolo essentially becomes the main obstacle for Chad, the American twin.
Oh, just him. I was just going to say, I would have assumed Bolo was, like Broly, and he needed to fight both Jean-Claude Van Dammes.
Well, again, this is where some of the limitations in what they could depict on screen come into play. A lot of the climax of the movie, and in fact, a lot of the middle of the movie, make sure to split them up either in completely different locations or fighting different people in different rooms. So the third act set piece, they're on a big boat, which they just use a warehouse interior to be the bowels of the ship. And they both get their own one-on-one fight against a major henchman. And then they both get to confront one of the two evil businessmen. And the whole thing takes place kind of separately.
Interesting. Okay. I get why. I get why they did it that way, but
yeah. So those elements, again, there's almost not a lot to even sift through. If you've seen a 90s action movie, you've seen this kind of story before. None of it's all that interesting. I do think, again, going back to the characterization, Jean-Claude tries his best to play Chad, the American twin, again, as this more silly, a little bit more jokey, not like he's really cracking jokes the whole time, but he's just a more aloof character. Whereas his portrayal of Alex is very serious. Alex isn't very funny, but that comes back around because Alex does the funniest thing in the whole movie in the middle of the second act.
Oh, good. Amazing.
Because to flesh out the plot a little bit more, at a certain point in the movie, the two twins and Uncle Frankie go to a abandoned hotel in this tiny island off the shore of Hong Kong, and that's their base of operations. And then later in the story, the bad guys show up and there's a brawl during that segment, and then they escape to set up the end. But there's this whole beat where they can only get to this island by boat, and they only have one boat. So there's this plot line where Alex's girlfriend, Danielle, is in trouble, and she tries to contact the two twins. Only Chad, the American guy, is there, And so he goes to try to help her while the other two are just like off on the island somewhere. And then when they find out about it, they can't get there. They're like, oh, he needs to come back with the flippin' boat or else we're never going to get over there. But then in the interim, Alex is somehow convinced that his girlfriend is cheating on him with his twin.
Again? This plot point comes back?
Yes, because that beat happens at the beginning where she genuinely mistakes American twin for her boyfriend because she doesn't know he has a twin. But then later in the story, he becomes convinced through a miscommunication that she actually is cheating on him with his twin. And his solution to this, while there's this whole action beat going on the mainland with Chad and Danielle, Rude Boy Alex is just sitting on their little hotel, like, base, just drinking alcohol and being sad. Because, again, they didn't want to have to put both of them in that action sequence, and he has nothing to do in the interim, so he's just sitting there drinking and spends, I kid you not, I think over 2 minutes of screen time visualizing his girlfriend having sex with his twin as a way to tell the viewer that he is worried that she is cheating on him. And it is the weirdest, most uncomfortable scene in cinema history.
What? Really? What do you mean?
Because so as we said, a lot of Jean-Claude Van Damme's movies, he kind of like makes himself the object of desire. And there's a lot of stories where he'll have a love interest, but they're not super like leery, they're not very male gaze, kind of putting in a bunch of naked women or anything. But this one, I guess, felt obligated to have a sex scene in the middle, and they had no idea how to fit it in the movie. So the way they show it is that he, the other twin, because he's worried he's being cheated on, imagines a sex scene between his girlfriend and his twin brother, and we just keep intercutting between the sex scene and him stumbling around drinking for like an abhorrently long time.
Oh, that is odd. That's not, because why not just, if you want that scene in there and you already have one of Jean-Claude Van Damme's characters with his girlfriend, like, just why not just have them have a sex scene? Like,
I don't know. And it just goes on forever because every time we cut back to Alex, we think, okay, now he does something, right? Nope, we're back. We're going back to the sex scene and there's no audio over it. And it's shot in this very strange way because it's supposed to be almost like a dream. I hated it. It was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen.
Oh, that's... it sounds dumb. It does sound dumb.
Extremely dumb. You could cut that whole beat out. The only thing we need to know is that he's worried she's cheating on him. Because then, when Chad and his girlfriend get back, this is what cues the two Van Dammes to get into a fight with each other. Because evil Van Damme has been drinking. He's not making any sense. We do also get a bit where his girlfriend tries to explain and he, like, slaps her, and I was like, okay, that's a bridge too far if his whole characterization is that he like cares about her so much. So I didn't like that. But then we get a very short actual one-on-one fight scene between the two Van Dammes.
Okay. All right. So they're both good guys really throughout the whole film. It's just one is a little more hard-boiled, like you said.
Essentially, which I do think is maybe something they could have approached differently, because when he first shows up, his whole dynamic is that he's a criminal himself. He's doing like petty crime. He's just selling illegal goods. But most of his criminal connections don't really come into play. Like, the bad guy tries to hire him to do something, but he accidentally grabs the wrong twins, so we get this interaction where Chad is being approached by one of the villains, and that moves the plot along. But character-wise, they get on the same page almost immediately, and other than this brief spat where they're fighting each other, they don't really get in each other's way at all. They try to work together, and then they have some hurdles, but eventually succeed, which I just think is a oversimplification of a plot that could have gone in a lot of more interesting directions, especially because this fight scene isn't really worth the build-up. As we talked about, they have to shoot it mostly as like a shot reverse shot thing, where we see Chad throw a kick, and then we immediately cut to Alex selling that he got hit with a kick.
Yeah.
And then they kind of just like brawl around for like 90 seconds, and then it's over.
Well, the other thing, because this is, I think you would say, falls into like the buddy cop movie genre. And
for sure,
usually that genre has two characters that are very distinct from one another, whereas both of these guys, one may be a little more nerdy, I guess, as you described him, but they're both still like kick-ass kung fu guys. So it's like...
Absolutely. This is the biggest problem. These two needed to be significantly different characters. And I think the easiest thing they could have done is make one of them more karate focused and one of them more of like the guns guy. Because even the poster for the movie says like one packs a punch, one packs a pistol, or something like that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that could have worked. Like, yeah, like the one guy going around blasting people. Like, well, the other one's much more like, pacifistic martial arts Jackie Chan type guy.
I think that would have totally helped. Maybe it was like, it was either how it was scripted or it was just maybe a bit of an ego thing for Van Damme that he needed both. He's like, inside of me, there are two wolves. They are both very good at martial arts.
It's true. It is true, though.
So I agree that really would have helped here. I guess you couldn't have had the one-on-one, but you could have even leaned into the fact that despite their training, Chad Van Damme was like more of an aerobics guy. He could have been doing like judo throws or something, something more specific.
Yeah.
Because as it stands, once the action starts, it doesn't really matter which Van Damme we're following. And visually, the only difference between them is that Alex Van Damme smokes a lot of cigars and has like slicked back hair, and then Chad Van Damme just doesn't smoke and has like normal hair.
Yeah, it's Van Damme and Cooler Van Damme is the two.
Cooler Van Damme is essentially the problem. Yeah. He's like, I'm just worried that Van Damme thinks people can't change because he used to have his slicked back hair.
Yeah, exactly.
It's basically that.
You could have had the one, like when they do fight, he's shooting at him, but the other guy's doing like aerobic stretches to dodge the bullets and get out of the way.
That would be pretty good. That's the problem too, is that also Chad Van Damme tries his best to look out of place. Like there's a couple of funny bits. Like when they first get to the island hideout, it's like a completely broken down building. And Alex Van Damme has brought like nothing with him but the cigar in his mouth, whereas Chad has like his suit pressed and is like hanging off a hanger, and he's trying to like daintily like step over puddles so that he can go hang it up. It's kind of like when Johnny Cage shows up in the first live action Mortal Kombat and he's got all of his luggage and it all falls in the water. He's trying, but a lot of that is in the script and not so much in Van Damme's performance.
Yeah, well, and it's funny. I mean, Johnny Cage, the character was literally based on Jean-Claude Van Damme. Like
that's true.
Yeah, so it's
because his signature move in Mortal Kombat is the like doing the splits and then punching the guy in the nuts, which is how Van Damme wins at the end of Bloodsport.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Actually, come to think of it, we get payback from Bloodsport because at one point, Bolo Young and Chad Van Damme have a original encounter like halfway through the movie, and Chad Van Damme's doing pretty good, but Bolo gets one over on him because he punches him in the nuts.
Oh, that's great. See, I love that. I love that it's like a continuation. It's
that's like a meta-narrative. Yeah, like their feud has continued. And we do get, I will say, the action beats at the end of the story are okay. Like, we do get more of a fight scene between Bolo and Chad. We also have a fight scene between Cool Guy Alex and this unnamed henchman whose gimmick is that he works for the Triads, but he kind of looks like an Italian mobster. And he has shoes with spurs as if he's a cowboy, but the spurs are super sharp so he can stab people with them.
Good. Yeah, no, that's great. That's
all of which is great, and you'd be surprised at how little attention that gets. I think he kills one guy with those super spurs, and then towards the end, he fights Alex Van Damme and is trying to kick him with the spurs. So both of those fights are decent, and Bolo Young does get killed with basically a Mortal Kombat fatality because they're inside the like cargo ship, and Chad Van Damme essentially does the classic move where he kicks him into like a high voltage like electrical box thing.
You gotta watch out for those.
Everybody knows you go anywhere near one of those boxes, you just immediately get electrocuted, even if it's closed. But he gets knocked into one of those, and then it creates a spark that catches like a bunch of barrels of gasoline on fire and blows up the whole ship. So it's a very like big ending to that fight. But again, you might have been better off trying to craft like a 2-on-1 where they have to work together to beat Bolo Young.
That's what I was hoping for, yeah.
Yeah, rather than having one of the twins fight this like nameless henchman who has no role in the story.
Yeah, especially because it's like the Bloodsport reunion. That would have been great, but it's okay. We got enough, I suppose.
This is helping me hone in on what I thought was frustrating about Double Impact because, like you were saying, it's a buddy cop movie. They're not really at each other's throats. We don't spend 2 acts in the movie with them working against each other. They're on the same page. They just don't get along. But again, because of how complicated it is to shoot, the two Van Dammes don't really talk directly to each other that much. They mostly speak through Uncle Frank as like an intermediary for dialogue, and I think that's probably the biggest thing that drags down the energy, is that there's just not enough of like a banter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what makes like the buddy cop movie work. Is that these two characters? I mean, Rush Hour is the perfect example. That you have these two completely different characters that are
like, imagine if Rush Hour was two Jackie Chans, and the only difference was that one of them slicked his hair back and they never spoke.
Which would still be fun. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's kind of why I picked this movie, because I'm like, this is gonna be fun regardless. But like,
and it is.
Yeah.
I think the movie is still fun. And oddly, my main takeaway when it was over was this was not a fully realized idea, but it is actually a pretty good vehicle for Jean-Claude Van Damme. Because while he is primarily known for like his martial arts skills, he is a charismatic performer. He's not like someone who you could trust to deliver, you know, a super nuanced performance, but just giving him these two very like obvious contrasting characters to play is fun. And I do think that if they were to have made a sequel or done it again later with like something that took advantage of that premise, you could have had a much better movie.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was reading the IMDb trivia, and as recently as 2012, when Van Damme was promoting The Expendables 2, which I forgot he was in, but while they were promoting, so this is 2012, like he was talking about wanting to do a Double Impact 2, which is just really interesting to me over the course of his whole career, that like far down the line, like this was the film franchise he wanted to return to. And I can read, this was his quick pitch for what the rough idea of the plot.
Oh, he has he's got a story pitch.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, awesome.
He's into this. So he said during the interview, he gave a rough idea of what the plot could be. It would be two twins. One is coming back from Asia to Los Angeles to help his brother, who is a con artist and pretending to be a big Hollywood producer, and he's in trouble with the mob. So I don't know if this is like we're rebooting or if we're following up from
that
the first one.
Would be confusing, because that would imply that nice guy Chad Van Damme had gotten into trouble with the mob and had become a con artist.
Yes, but he also, the other interesting thing too is, on this particular movie, talking about Bolo Yeung, Van Damme said he specifically wanted Bolo Yeung for Double Impact, but he also wants him for the sequel, and he wanted them to team up in this one. Like, he wanted them to be on the same side in the sequel, which it sounds like he died in this first one, so I don't know how that would work.
We didn't see a body. He could come back as like...
I didn't hear no bell.
I didn't hear no bell. He could come back as like the Human Torch or something.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay. That's great.
Or like the Phantom of the Opera. It's funny, actually, because he's already scarred. Because when the movie opens in the flashback, he gets shot a couple of times by Uncle Frankie. So when he pops up again in the present day story, he has like a white, like solid eye and like a scar all over his face. So it'd be pretty funny if he just kept coming back as like an increasingly like scarred body of Bolo Yeung, and he's like, I got one more in me.
Wait, Uncle Frankie Kong shot Bolo Yeung?
He did. So at the beginning, it's kind of Batman-y, but it's more like a mob hit thing where the parents are getting out of their car and these triad guys, including Bolo, just like shoot both the parents. But in order to rescue the baby twins, the uncle had to like shoot a couple of the guys himself, and he did clip Bolo like in the eye as he was getting away.
Dude, you're previewing Soldier so much. There's so many connections here. Yeah. Yeah.
Ah. Well, I guess that makes it a good double feature, huh?
Yeah, I suppose so. Look at us. Look at us.
Look at us. We did this.
Anyway,
yeah, what else can we take credit for? I did have, you were talking about a sequel. It's so funny that actually was talked about, because one of the things I did when I was finished is because I want there to be a sequel, I wrote down a list of potential titles for a sequel.
Oh yeah, let's hear those.
So I'm thinking we got a couple ways to go, because the first one was not silly enough. For instance, it says the movie's called Double Impact, and then in the top of the credits, the first name that kind of slams down just says Jean-Claude Van Damme. And I was so expecting it to be like Jean-Claude Van Damme, like another one would come down.
Yeah.
But they kind of missed the chance. So I'm like, okay, we need to lean sillier on this. So I think you could call the next one Double Impact 2, The Doubling.
The Doubling, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You could call it Double Impact. As like a stylized title, because that's kind of what it looks like the poster for this one says.
Oh, sure. Yeah, okay.
Or if we wanted a Simpsons reference, it could be I'm seeing double here, 4 Van Dams.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Simpsons one gets my vote if we're picking from
I mean,
that lineup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, we could do triple impact and there could be like a third twin. And it's like the Austin Powers gag where we just pan slightly over and there's like another baby in the car.
Well, that's what I was going to say when you were saying like his name drops in and then it drops in again and then it just keeps dropping in. You just it's
like Spider-Man across the multiverse, but it's just a bunch of very slightly different Jean-Claude Van Dammes.
They just got different sized cigars and stuff. It's just like
he's like, I'm a martial artist and I have glasses. Any pending questions about Double Impact? Again, it's kind of a short summary. The plot is whatever. It's pretty boring. You get some satisfying villain deaths at the end, and you get 2 Van Dammes, albeit it's really like 1.5 characters. There's not enough to differentiate them.
Which is kind of funny, honestly. Like
it is kind of funny. That almost makes it better.
Yeah, it does, actually. Like that they couldn't do. I mean, it sounds like they tried. It sounds like they tried to make. I think you described him as dainty, the more like clean cut Van Damme, but at the end of the day,
I would say that the clean cut Van Damme is kind of playing it like Johnny Cage from Mortal Kombat, whereas the other one is playing it just again more villainous. I do think that there are a lot of stories of twins separated at birth who go on to have remarkably similar qualities. Like it'll be like, oh, we both married someone named this and then had a second wife who was also named the same thing. Like, so maybe that would be the better joke in the movie is if their lives are like remarkably the same, despite them trying to push this, like you grow up with everything handed to you, but then they just turned into the same guy.
Yeah. It could have been funny too if they just never had any issues either. They just like really were like, this guy's awesome. Like,
yeah, did we just become best friends?
Yeah, exactly. You want to go Double Impact, everybody? Like...
that sounds bad. One other point. So last episode, I talked about how, and we'll get into ratings later, but I talked about how I subtracted a whole point from Soap Dish because it had the classic 90s trans panic ending, right?
Yes.
This does not have that, but we do get multiple instances of Alex Van Damme calling Chad Van Damme a homophobic slur. So...
Whoa. Jeez.
It is so sharp. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I guess in 1991 this wouldn't have like turned as many heads, but A, it should have, and B, it's jarring to watch now. So I do think that factors into it should be a very silly movie, but a couple of things like that kind of like sour the vibes a bit.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's unfortunate. That isn't. It's we're exploring films that I think, as we said before, are a product of their time, but. Yeah, viewing it through a modern lens, that sounds very cutting to hear that throughout the film. Yeah.
Couldn't believe he said it once. Couldn't believe he said it again. I was like, wow, he is doubling down.
Double Impact.
Yeah. Both been canceled for their homophobic slurs. And you're just like, wow, we really are alike.
Well, that's a fun movie too. One of the Jean-Claudes gets canceled, and then like the other one has to like fill in for him. He's canceled from his crime syndicate.
Oh, there you go.
They're like, we sell drugs, but we draw the line at homophobic slurs, Van Damme.
He gets kicked out for being just like super racist and homophobic, and they're just like, we don't want that in our organization. And there's like a guy tied up in the background.
There's like an HR person that is just like, I'm sorry.
All right, well, I think that more than does it for Double Impact. So we will head into our intermission and then come back with Frank's review of 1998's Soldier. Okay, we are back now for review number 2 on the day. Frank, this was your film to watch that I recommended, 1998's Soldier. Before we hand it over to you, I picked this one out, again, almost as a challenge to myself, because on paper, I'm trying to recommend the best movie possible, because I want to win. I'm a winner. But this movie has terrible reviews, and I'm convinced that you're going to like it anyway.
Are the reviews terrible? How bad were they?
The Rotten Tomatoes score, when I looked it up, I want to say was below 20%.
No, are you? Hang on, I'm gonna look this up just.
Yeah.
Because like I rented the movie on some platform and it looked like it had like a 58.
I don't know if mine was showing me the critic score or the user score. Sometimes those are pretty different.
Yes, yes. So it is sitting on it is at a 58 right now, but that's I actually don't know if that's the
Weird. Okay, so maybe Google was showing me something funny, but I definitely knew the movie was not well regarded, but it stars Kurt Russell, who is a favorite for both of us, and it was directed by, I think the name is Paul W.S. Anderson, right?
yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Who directed a ton of Resident Evil movies. And I know that there was a point in time, like 10 years ago, where you were trying to make me watch all those Resident Evil movies, and I didn't. But I know you like them, so that was my other angle for why I think you might like Soldier.
Yeah, well, first of all, those movies are a lot of fun, and you should watch them. But those are going to be
First thing out of the way about Soldier, right? Watch Resident Evil.
They're campy, they're fun. Yeah, I know you'd mentioned that last time, but when I was watching the movie, I wasn't even thinking about that this was one of his directorial credits because he made the Resident Evil movies, but he's always making like these other. He made a recent movie with his wife Mila Djokovic and Dave Bautista.
Oh, he's married to Mila Jovovich?
Oh yeah, that's why there's so many Resident Evil movies. That's just like what they do together.
It's just them daring the other one to cave. It's like, you're going to star in another one, and they're like, you're going to direct another one, and then they both get to set. And they're like, dang it! I was hoping one of us would back out.
Here we go again.
Resident Evil 8, double impact.
It's just. Yeah, but they're campy, they're fun. It's interesting to go back and watch one of his earlier films, actually. But yeah, Soldier was interesting. There's a lot of like interesting elements to this movie, and I will say, I think you were mentioning that it's not what was not well received. I think it's a film that has found an audience long after its release. I think it's become sort of a cult film in a way.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, to preview our scoring system at the end here, I have no idea how I'm going to score this film because
I'm in the same boat with mine today, so that's a theme for the day.
Well, it's so interesting because it's rare that I see a film like this where I can't fault it for much. I feel like it didn't make any real egregious mistakes or things that you would look at and be like, this was a real miss, or, it didn't execute on this in a certain way. I feel like it did most things right, but was not that entertaining. So that it kind of puts it in a weird place for me, but there's some very interesting production behind the scenes elements too that I found out after watching the movie that really intrigued me. So there's a lot going on here. Yeah.
So the movie, all I know, I watched it to give some information about how I try to select these movies. I never want to know too much because I don't want the decision to be that well informed. So I'm a fan of watching trailers for stuff with the sound turned off. And all I could tell from this one is just that it was a science fiction movie, and it pretty much looked like Kurt Russell trying to play Master Chief from Halo. And I assumed that would be kind of the main arc of the movie, is just like sci-fi action man.
Yeah, no, I mean it's appropriate that you bring up Halo. That was my first thought at the beginning of the movie. Is because he's like the movie begins with him as like a baby, and he's just taken straight from the hospital and put into this like military training program.
Whose job do you think it is to look at like the nursery full of newborn babies and be like, which of these would be a good soldier? And the other guy's like, what?
That's literally, there were people, there was like army guys going around, I think like giving scores or something to these babies as to like, like.
It's an 8 out of 10 baby.
Yeah. I think he literally goes up to baby Kurt Russell and puts like 1A. Like, this is like S tier baby right here. Like,
this is an ultra rare holographic baby.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how he knew that or what he was basing that on.
What an easy job. No matter what happens, if it doesn't pan out, you're like, I mean, it was a baby, boss. I don't know what you want me to do.
What do you want from me? Which that actually gets into the plot of the movie. So like, that's interesting. But yeah, basically to like roughly set it up, I guess. It's very like near future sci-fi, it's not Star Wars, Star Trek, where we're on different like, traveling through space and visiting aliens and stuff like that. This is like a near future Earth is kind of what the film is presenting. And the beginning of the film it is very much, I was thinking of Halo, because it's kind of the same origin for that character, where like, you know, he's picked up at birth and put into this soldier program, and then he basically spends his whole life doing this. So we kind of get this montage of him like growing up. And a fun bit of trivia right off the bat is like, you know, we see him as a baby, and then like a 12-year-old or something, and then, you know, is like 18, and then like adult Kurt Russell. And 12-year-old Kurt Russell was played by his son, Wyatt Russell, who is now...
From Thunderbolts.
From Thunderbolts, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think this was his first movie.
See, that's a different categorization. So when they got Kurt Russell, they put 1A, but when they got to Wyatt Russell, they just put Nepo.
Yes, exactly. 1A
Distinct again. Military classification, Nepo, baby.
So that was fun. That was just a fun little thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then, so it just leads to this really interesting character for Kurt Russell, because he spent his whole life just killing people. You know, there's a montage of him in all these different battles, these different wars, you know, and he does not speak. He has no lines until maybe 30, 40 minutes into the movie.
Wow.
Yeah, it's late into the film that we get like the first line of dialogue from Kurt Russell, and then even after that, he speaks very rarely. There's like 3 or 4 scenes where he actually talks. So it's interesting in that regard. And I mean, Kurt Russell is huge in this movie. Like, he is jacked, and I've never seen him look like this before. You know, normally Kurt Russell...
Yeah, that must have been short-lived.
Yes, and this again, this also right away gets into some of the interesting like production elements in the movie, because, you know, I see him and I'm like, okay, what's it called in Space Jam? I was like, Kurt Russell's been using some of Michael Jordan's secret stuff.
Secret stuff.
And I was like, all right, so he's a little juiced up for this movie. But then apparently, allegedly, Kurt Russell, like in pre-production for this movie, knew that he had to get into a certain shape for this character, but he did not want to use steroids. And so he went on this like intensive 18-month training regimen in order to bulk up for the role. And it led to production getting delayed for like a full year almost, because, you know, they just needed him to get into shape for the role. And then I think the director in between went to go work on a different film. And that led to what I would consider like really one of the only major, I guess something you could look at as like an error or a fault of the film, is the visual effects are really bad. At certain points, to the visual effects of like certain landscapes, because I guess the idea originally was, you know, they had an idea in mind of this looking somewhat like a Western. And so, but like, you know, sort of a sci-fi Western. And so they had all these exterior locations, you know, that they had scouted, and that's where they were going to film the movie. But then because they had to wait these 18 months for Kurt Russell to get in shape for the role, in the interim, like the El Nino hurricane apparently came through and destroyed a lot of the filming locations that they were going to use. And so they wound up having to shoot a lot of those scenes that they intended to shoot there on location on like sound stages, and they just wind up looking really like wonky green screen.
That is a bummer, because I bet that the ones they had were probably, I mean, nothing holds up better in an old movie than a real place, whereas anything that is completely generated like that is just going to look terrible.
Exactly. It looks awful. And I mean, it's, you know, it's 1998 green screen visual effects for these like massive landscapes, as opposed to, just planet Earth, like outside.
Yeah. Guys, I got this fascinating idea for a filming location, right? Over there. He's just pointing to the door.
Right there. Get out. But anyway, to get into the story a little bit, the villain of the film is introduced. It's Jason Isaacs, who is probably most well known for being Lucius Malfoy, I think, in the Harry Potter films. So he comes in, and Kurt Russell's character, who his name is Todd, he has it tattooed on his face. It is just
on his face.
On his face. It's like it just says Todd, and then like his like service number, and then all of these soldiers that went through this program have the same thing. They just have first names that are tattooed on their face.
I thought you meant they were all named Todd.
Just Todd and different numbers. That would have been good too, actually.
The service number is like Todd 117, Todd 1. They're just like, sir, I feel like we didn't need the first part.
It would have been pretty good, actually. You know what? It's funny, though, because it does kind of remind me... It was reminding me of a lot of other things, actually. You know, it's like, on paper, I should really like this film. Because it was reminding me of, like, Deep Space Nine, and it was kind of reminding me of, like, the Clone Wars TV series. Because, you know, we have these like, perfect soldiers, you know, that are raised from literal babies, you know, to be these murderers. And their captain, or whoever's in charge of their unit, is played by Gary Busey, who's just always a very interesting actor.
Strange man.
Very strange man, who always gives unique performances. But he's in charge of their unit, and then Jason Isaacs comes in, and he's like, I have these new soldiers that are genetically engineered. Like, they weren't born as normal babies and then raised to be soldiers. Like, we, like, bred these soldiers to be better, so your guys are obsolete. And
okay,
which is interesting. Like,
that's
sci-fi.
That's a good premise. Yeah.
And so, like, to demonstrate this, they're like, well, Todd's our best guy. Todd number 3465.
Raise your hand, Todd. All 600 hands go up.
Not you, Todd. Not you.
Not you, Todd. Just, we never found out a better way to categorize them.
Picturing them talking to each other too, like, "What's up, Todd?" Anyway, Kurt Russell, Todd. They're like, he's our best guy, so we're gonna have him, you know, go up against one of your genetically engineered guys. And there's some other shenanigans, but basically they fight each other. And Kurt Russell, and this ties back to what you were mentioning in Double Impact. Kurt Russell, while they're fighting, he like somehow like he has him like he's trying to put like a chokehold or something on this other soldier guy he's fighting, and the guy's like pulling him off, and Kurt Russell like grabs one of his eyes and kind of like basically rips one of the guy's eyes out and like scars his face. But then the other soldier guy, because they're, you know, trying to show he's better, they're the genetically engineered ones. It's this interesting scene that I feel like was difficult for them from like a visual production standpoint, because they're fighting like up on these like chain catwalk things. They're high up, and he kind of like elbows Kurt Russell, you know, off his back, and then Kurt Russell falls to the ground, you know, like lands on his back, eyes wide open, and it looks like he dies, right? And so they're like, all right, well, get that body out of here. Like, Jason Isaacs is like, see, I told you. But then he's all mad at his guy who was supposedly better, and he's like, how'd you let that inferior soldier like scar you like that, you know? He's like, you're useless now because you have no depth perception.
How you gonna throw a football now, soldier?
Yeah. So it was just interesting because basically what happens is, you know, they toss Kurt Russell's body onto this like trash planet because they're like, get rid of that. And then they drop him off there, and then he like wakes up from being dead. And I'm just like,
this is the unconscious gag again. So he somehow just wasn't moving, but was not dead. It was just a little concussion.
But his eyes, and this is why I was watching it, and I'm like, I can tell they didn't know how to do this, because if they'd done it the other way and just, you know, he fell on his back and closed his eyes, then the audience would assume, oh, he's just unconscious, he's not dead. And so why would they be dragging his body out of here? But then the opposite also doesn't work, because it's like, oh, his eyes are wide open, he looks like he's dead, he is dead. Why does he wake up later?
He looks like He's dead. He is dead. That's the coroner's report.
Just like, you know what I mean? Like, Todd, what's going on, buddy? Like,
Todd, stay with us. Yeah, like the whole thing's just a series of miscommunications. Like, did you get a dead Todd into the morgue today? And he's like, yeah, every day. And that was him. Like, yeah.
There's a lot of dead Todds, let me tell you. You know how many dead Todds I go through every day? But do you know what I mean, though? It's like they didn't know how to show that.
That's a very important piece of your premise, to not be able to depict visually.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see running into that wall of sorts, because neither option works in terms of how you're going to communicate this to your audience, you know?
You'd be better off throwing him into some sort of thing that he disappears into, like he collapses under a pile of machinery, or, you know, just like something obscures him completely and they're like, no way he could have survived that, as opposed to, look at him, he's dead.
Right, exactly. And like literally they like drag him away and his eyes are wide open and it's just like, what happened here? What did he just reboot your brain? Like, I don't understand how this happened to you.
Right. That beat would make sense for the genetically engineered soldiers to have like inhuman qualities like that, but Kurt Russell is just a holographic baby. He's normal.
Yep. Yeah, he's just a super rare. So anyway, that's what sets the plot off, is they drop him off on this garbage planet, and just leave him there because they assume he's dead. And then Kurt Russell is, you know, he finds a civilization of people that are living here on this planet. They're people that have been abandoned here for other reasons or have escaped Earth, because Earth is this war-torn place and, you know, its natural resources are destroyed and stuff. And so he just starts living with these people, and then essentially what the plot evolves into is a sort of, I guess, call like almost like a Seven Samurai type thing, but just with Todd, where it's like the, you know,
seven Todds,
but it's just one Todd.
Parentheses, it's just one Todd.
So it's him. He obviously makes friends with this community of people. And then for some reason, I don't really know why, some convoluted reason, Jason Isaacs and Gary Busey, they're like, oh, we got to bring our super soldier guys to this trash planet for some training thing or something. And Gary Busey's like, what if there's people there? And Jason Isaacs is like, don't be silly, that's stupid. But if there are, we're going to kill them. And so like they take their guys there. These super soldiers start killing this community that's kind of adopted Kurt Russell, and he has to fight back and kill them all. And it ends with him having another 1v1 against the super soldier whose eye he took out at the beginning.
And then the super soldier loses because he tries to swipe at him, but he has no depth perception.
He's just embarrassingly inept and just can't fight him.
Hey, Jesus. Yeah. This movie, I will say, we're making fun of it quite a bit, but like on paper, this premise ought to work just fine. It's like very familiar tropes with a like passable, leading actor, someone who I would trust to play a character that doesn't really speak, just because it's not a Jean-Claude situation. Kurt Russell's like an actor before he's an action star. He should be able to do it. So I'm curious what I guess just the execution fell apart even before the movie started filming.
Yes, I mean, it's just kind of disappointing because I think they had, some of their sets, some of the production design looks really good. And I think they had an idea for the whole movie to look like that. And I think that would have really elevated it. And it's not bad. That's the thing. It's not bad. It just is sort of lacking kind of a spark almost. It's I don't want to say boring because that's a really reductive description, but it's hard when your main character doesn't talk and is this very, not only doesn't talk, but is very emotionally stunted because that's the character he's playing. And there's some good beats in there. There's some good dialogue, some good performances. There's an interesting kind of thing. It's a trope that I don't like so much in movies, but you see sometimes where it's like, so Kurt Russell's with this community of people, but there's really specifically like one guy found him out in the wasteland, and this one family are the ones that kind of really bring him in. And it's a man, his wife, and their young son. And the man and his wife are portrayed as a very happy couple. But, you can see that Kurt Russell is like, he's not used to being around women, I guess, or something, and he's just very attracted to this woman. And I'm like, oh, Kurt Russell's gonna just ruin this man's family, isn't he? Because
it's a homewrecker.
Yeah, exactly. And they have their young son, but it's not like there's anything, they go out of their way to show that this is a happy family unit. And basically, fast forward to the end, like, the guy winds up dying, and then, like, the movie ends with, like, Kurt Russell, like, carrying around this kid like it's his kid. It's like, you just stole some other man's family.
Does he rename the kid Todd? Is that the closing beat?
It's so funny because and again, it's like silly in execution, but like makes sense narratively, I guess, for the character. But Kurt Russell, he ends every sentence with "sir." Everybody he's talking to, he talks to them like they're like a superior officer. So like even when he's talking to the kid or like the man's wife, I don't remember the name of her character, like he always calls her sir, because he just doesn't know what else to do. Like literally his entire life, he's just been this soldier. He has no idea how to do anything else or how to interact with people in any other way. And that's some of the limited dialogue he actually speaks in the film.
Right, that'd get annoying if he said it too much. That almost seems like it's driving him not having a lot of lines, is this gimmick that he has to say sir.
Yeah, right, every single time. So yeah, it's interesting, like, it's almost at odds with itself in ways like that, where it's like, yeah, this makes total sense, this is good sci-fi, but it's sort of lacking this entertainment factor throughout the film, because especially, like, the last act of the film is this, big action sequence where all these soldier guys are coming in, and Kurt Russell's kind of set up his, like, Home Alone traps all over the place to, like, get rid of them all. And that part's fine, but it's like, that's really, outside of like him fighting that other soldier guy at the beginning of the film, and then that longer sequence at the end, those are the only action moments in the film too. Not that in itself is a bad thing, but it also feels a little bit unbalanced in terms of being like an action sci-fi, because it's like we're kind of telling this smaller story.
Yeah, that almost sounds like mismarketing to even frame it as an action movie, which it definitely does.
Yes, it's funny because I was watching it, and I mean this in a good way, but I was watching it and I'm like, this feels like an episode of Deep Space Nine. I feel like Deep Space Nine would tell this story really well in 48 minutes or however much time they have per episode, and that's great. That works as an episode of Deep Space Nine, but it almost needed something else to make this like a feature film that's not connected to anything outside of that.
Which is a thing that people say about, because Deep Space Nine, Star Trek, I mean, a lot of the Star Trek movies that people don't like would also work as episodes of their respective shows, but there is an element missing to make them a movie. Like, that's a different set of expectations for what that kind of story would be.
Yes, totally. But that does bring me to one of the interesting, like, production elements as well, is, like, speaking of this not being related to anything outside of, this story, this film was written by David Webb Peoples, is his name. And he was the writer for Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner. And
really?
Yes, which this was very interesting. I did not know any of this until after I watched the film, and it really kind of recontextualized things in an interesting way. But he was the writer for Blade Runner. He was writing this film while Blade Runner was being produced. And according to him and Paul W.S. Anderson, this takes place in the same world as Blade Runner. This is the same universe.
This tracks. So I don't know if you saw this. I didn't want to say it before you saw the movie. But the reason I was introduced to Soldier was because of like a Reddit post or something, that there's this blink and you miss it shot where they pull up his military profile, and it has a bunch of references to other sci-fi stuff. Like, it says that this Kurt Russell character was present at one of the battles that the guy mentions in the monologue at the end of Blade Runner.
Yeah, he's in two of the battles. And you see those battles. They're part of the montage at the beginning of the movie. And it'll pop up on the bottom of the screen like what it is. And yeah, it's battles or wars that they mentioned in Blade Runner that are then shown here in this movie. And there's more production elements.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's more production elements that tie it to Blade Runner 2. There's ships, like spaceships that are from Blade Runner are seen in this movie. And there's even it's not clearly stated, but somewhat speculated that these new super soldiers that they made are replicants, and that's why they have these sort of enhanced abilities, which is kind of like how the replicants were in the original Blade Runner.
It's also funny because Blade Runner is a movie that I would describe as very good, but in its own way, kind of slow and boring. Like, it makes some similar plotting mistakes that ought to take away from your enjoyment of the film, but it's just saved by the like kind of meditative atmosphere of the whole story. But it's in a similar place to Soldier, where it feels like it's missing elements that you ought to have to tell like a fleshed out story. And I think this one, without that saving grace, just falls as flat as Blade Runner easily could have.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I mean, to bring it back to Soldier, yeah, it's just like there's films you can look at, like Double Impact. It's like you look at Double Impact, and you're like, okay, here's some things that could have made this a better film. Here's some things that you could objectively say were mistakes or bad choices, like whatever. But with this movie, it's like, honestly, I feel like they executed pretty well on what they were trying to do. You know, it like there was no glaring like technical issues outside of the kind of poor green screen effects. But, you know, decent performances. It was an interesting concept. It just was lacking something that's kind of hard to put your finger on what it is, like what it would have taken to kind of bring this movie around. But I think for some people, you know, like I was saying earlier, I think it's found an audience that does really appreciate it, which is interesting too.
I think science fiction, more than most genres, runs the risk of falling into that kind of middling, boring territory. And I think there's like some obvious reasons from that from a storytelling perspective. Like, so much of what a film wants you to feel is based on setting up expectations and then subverting them or doing something to create a reaction. And that's so much easier to do if the movie is primarily grounded in concepts and imagery that a person is familiar with. Whereas science fiction definitionally has to make the whole space and tell you so much lore up front. But this one, yeah, it's an action movie. It was marketed as an action movie. It's got Kurt Russell in it. Like, you need stuff to happen. You need some double impact in here, or else it's just never going to work.
Yeah, and I mean, again, also to the movie's credit, it cut out so much unnecessary things that I think another film might have done. Where, you know, there was no opening credits scrawl like in the year 2049 Earth fell to, you know, none of that. It was just like it just jumped right into it, and it didn't dumb itself down to its audience at all. Like, you know, your main character is not even speaking for most of the film, and it doesn't like hold your hand through that. It just is like, yeah, like here's what's happening. It's telling it all visually, as like right off the gate, like, you know, but it's very clear. It's very easy to understand, you know, this sort of sci-fi space that you're in. And at no point really does it, you know, like I said, do what I've seen other films do, where it would try and like over-explain. Like you're saying with John Claude's accent. We don't need to explain that the man has an accent. You know, it's like you can just understand what's happening in front of you. So yeah, there's a lot.
Need to... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a lot to give the movie credit for in that regard. It's like I appreciate it more than I liked it, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. There's a ton of movies that fall into that camp. That's curious. Any other like major beats you wanted to talk about with it, or do you think that kind of sums up your feelings on Soldier?
I mean, you know, I think it does. There's other things that happen throughout the film that, you know, were interesting. There was like there was a lot of snakes. There was
What does that mean?
there was just this whole recurring thing. I skipped over it completely, but there was that, you know, this family, this community at large, but specifically this family of three that takes Kurt Russell in. You know, they have this young boy who also doesn't speak. He's, you know, like Kurt Russell can speak, but this kid, like, I guess at one point, like, they're gardening. They're on this like trash planet, and they're like trying to, you know, grow food in this little makeshift garden that they have. And I guess this planet's covered in snakes. And so like,
okay, so it's a junk planet full of snakes.
Yes. And so like a snake shows up, and, you know, like one of the woman in this family, she like kills it, and she explains to Kurt Russell, she was like, you know, our son, he was bit by one of these snakes when he was really young, and he hasn't spoken since then. And so then, like, later in the film, like, Kurt Russell and the kid are together, and, like, a snake comes into the room, and Kurt Russell's, like, trying to show the kid, like, how to smash it with a shoe. Like, he's trying to, like, he's like, you know, pantomiming. He's like, he has a shoe, and he's, like, slamming it on the ground. He's, like, pointing at the kid and the snake, like, you know, kill that snake with a shoe. And then the parents walk in and like, what are you doing? Why are you, like, trying to, you know, like, get this snake out of here? And so what this leads to later is this couple is in bed later. And this is another plot beat I kind of skipped over because it's resolved pretty quickly. But at one point, Kurt Russell, you know, he has like severe PTSD from his experiences, and he's like training while he's in this community at one point, and somebody kind of comes up behind him and he like turns around and starts like choking the guy out. So they're like, "You're crazy. You gotta go. You gotta go out into the wasteland now." Yeah. So he gets kind of kicked out of the community at one point. And while he's gone, you know, the couple, they're in bed, and a snake is coming into the bed. And I'm like, all right, this is the third instance of snake. I was like, at this point, I'm like, this is too many snakes. But like, the snake is crawling in their bed, and it's about to bite one of them. And then the kid grabs the snake, pulls it out of bed, and smashes it with a shoe like Kurt Russell showed him to. And then immediately, the husband is like, you know what, we were wrong. I got to go get Kurt Russell. We got to bring him back.
I had no idea he had such advanced shoe smashing technology.
That he taught our son how to kill the snake. I love him. You know what? You stay here, wife. I'm going to go die, and then Kurt Russell will come back without me. It'll be great.
Well, he dies going to fetch him?
Yeah, because that's when the super soldiers show up as well. He's out there bringing Kurt Russell back, and they show up, and they just start blasting people, and they kill this guy.
Is any of that with the voices and the snakes, is that a metaphor that I'm not getting, or is this just like noise for the plot?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, there was something kind of, I think, about the fact that Kurt Russell spoke throughout the film, just very rarely. But I think there was something about the fact that he didn't talk and the kid didn't talk. And then there was a fourth instance of snakes where where the super soldiers are all there attacking. He throws one of them into a giant pit of snakes, and it looks like, you know, raiders. Like, why did it have to be snakes? And then the snakes.
I mean, if any movie has earned the right to say why did it have to be snakes, it's this one.
Yeah, and you know what? I almost completely didn't mention it at all, but they were all over the film. There was a lot of snakes.
That is such a buried lead in this movie. It sounded like there was a simple beginning, middle, end, and then you're like, oh, we filled the interim time with mostly just snake content.
Yeah, exactly, though. So again, it's an interesting film. There's a lot to discuss here.
I like that we don't fill in all the gaps. There's stuff in Double Impact, too, that I didn't cover. So I'm just picturing someone who got this far in and went, I guess I'll watch Soldier anyway. And then they got to the end and like, why didn't he talk about those snakes?
Yeah, there was a lot of them. There was a lot of snakes on this trash planet. I don't know why. Maybe somebody just dumped a boatload of snakes off one day. like we don't need
like
these.
What their trash was.
Yeah, just anyway, leave those there. That's for Todd.
That's for Todd. It's become like part of their culture that they say things in general. Just like, you know what they say, another day, another Todd.
Oh, also, one more thing. All the other Todds, so the whose names are not Todd, they all have their own names, but
disagree.
Yeah, agree to disagree on that one. But they so immediately got like replaced by these super soldiers that they became like, it was just this interesting beat where like all of them were still with this military organization, but you know, Jason Isaacs and his crew are like, we don't need you anymore. Like, you, when we get to this planet, we're sending you guys out there without weapons to just like set up like machinery or something. You know, they're like, you're just grunts now. You're not even soldiers anymore. Which again was interesting. You know, it's like, oh, okay, this, you know, because like they're all like Kurt Russell, where it's like they have emotions. They are human beings, but they just don't know how to process or deal with any of this because all they've ever been is these soldiers. You know,
is that the imagery we're trying to get? Is about like finding your voice while living in a system that is trying to like oppress you and control your every move?
Possibly. I mean, because there is one good line of dialogue too between Kurt Russell and the wife in this family unit, where she's just talking to him and she was just like, "What do you think about?" You know, and he doesn't know how to answer. She's like, "Sure, you know, surely you must be must think things, Todd. Like, you must...
Like the worst first date ever. Surely you think things, Todd.
Like, and she's like, what about feelings? She was like, do you have feelings or emotions? And, at first he doesn't know how to answer, but then after a minute, he just goes, he's like, fear. And she's like, what do you mean fear? She's like, all the time? He's like, yeah. He's like, constant. He's like, fear and discipline. Like, that's all I feel. And, so she just feels really bad for him in that moment because he's just this, like, kind of child almost, that just doesn't know how to deal with these things. And at the end of the movie, once they kill all the super soldier guys, they bring all the other Todds with them to join their little community too. So they all live happily ever. They actually blow the planet up at the end. I'm bearing a lot of leads here.
Wait, what? They can't go home with them, but they blew the planet up.
They steal at the end of the movie. They steal Jason Isaacs' ship that he brought all these super soldiers there on, and because I guess, so once Jason Isaacs realizes that Kurt Russell is out there killing all of his super soldier guys, he's like, screw this. Like, we have a planet destroyer bomb on this ship. He's like, leave that here, and we're leaving. So that's what he was sending the other Todds out to do, was to set up this bomb.
Okay.
And so they wind up taking the ship and leaving Jason Isaacs and his crew outside when the planet explodes, and then they like fly away and they, find a new home to live on together or something.
Sounds like the end of Thor Ragnarok.
A little bit, yeah. Pretty similar to that, actually.
So at the start of the next movie, Thanos shows up, and then they all get killed anyway.
Thor doesn't, so I assume all the other Todds will die, but Todd number
all
one.
the other Todds, yep.
Kurt Russell Todd will be fine.
Okay, well, I guess I almost stopped you too soon, because I clearly did not yet know enough about Soldier before we got into the snakes and Todds of it all.
Yeah. There's great stuff in there. Great stuff in Soldier.
Oh, jeez. Okay, well, that was a lot. Why don't we move on to scores? Because I think that's going to be a sticking point for both of us this week.
Yeah, you have to go first. So
yeah. Oh, jeez. So Double Impact. God, it feels like a lifetime ago we were talking about Double Impact. Double Impact.
We were so young.
We were so young. That was the pre-Todd days. Double Impact, I went into with very low expectations, which is to say that I was probably going to like it unless it really found a way to be like super boring or offensive somehow. And it did get kind of close with all the homophobic slurs. But again, you almost have to brace for that when you watch a movie that's this old. So I was torn the whole way through of like, what do I say about this? Because now that we're like 4 episodes in, our scores have become relative, I mean, if you give, I think I gave Soap Dish a 3 last time, right?
Yeah, which I think is what I also gave
Grifters,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
In episode 2. So that's currently our bottom, like our lowest ranking films. And I'd be hard pressed to say that I liked Double Impact less than either of those. I mean, I didn't see Grifters, but I liked it more than Soap Dish because I was bound to. I like martial arts action movies. So I'm tempted to say that my score for Double Impact is a 4. It could...
That's lower than I thought.
It could easily have gone lower because really, it loses a lot every point that it gains by just doing something strange or poorly. I mean, I think one of the biggest things I forgot to talk about is that the film's cinematography ought to be really cool because they're filming on location in Hong Kong and they're shooting a lot of scenes out on like the port side of Hong Kong with like boats and stuff. And it should look really neat, but in so many of the scenes, they're so concerned about the fact that they can't convincingly show you 2 Jean-Claudes at once that the whole thing feels kind of boxed in. It's like unconfident in how it is shot. And I think that's one of the biggest things that between that, the 2 Jean-Claudes barely speaking to each other, and the lack of like thoughtful choreographed martial arts sequences, it just doesn't hit the marks I was expecting it to. So I do think a 4 is as much as I can give for Double Impact.
That's fair. Like I said, that is lower than I thought you would give it, but it sounds like it earned a 4.
It would have been a 5 if not for some of the weird stuff, like the horrible sex scene and the homophobia and stuff, like those things collectively, I was like, you can't get by unscathed after having all of this in here.
Sure. Okay, 4 for Double Impact. Is it my turn?
Yeah.
No, you
There's
go.
no one else to go.
Todd, what are you thinking?
Todd, what were your thoughts on Sweeney Todd?
How many snakes would you give this, Todd?
We're just going to make Todd watch Snakes on a Plane and tell us his thoughts about it.
But he won't speak, so he would just stare
He
at you,
can't
I think.
speak, yeah. Surely you must have thoughts about this, Todd. And he just says fear.
It's valid. Okay, Soldier, man, it's a tough one. Soldier is like, it's more interesting than it is good, but
Yeah.
I do appreciate a lot about it. So that puts it in a sort of interesting middle ground, which is not like, I feel like, satisfying score-wise. I feel like I do like to try and be more definitive when I can, but it feels kind of like a 6.
Oh, see, now this is the opposite. I thought you'd go way lower.
No, Soldier was, again, good in its own way. Because I'm thinking back to how I scored Gamera. Like, I gave Gamera a 10 out of 10. Because
it was
obviously,
awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. And obviously there were things it succeeded at exactly what it was trying to do. It knew exactly what it wanted to be. And I think in a lot of ways, Soldier did as well. I think it succeeded in executing like the concept of the film. It just wasn't as awesome as Gamera. So I feel like it lands, like, I'm going to say 6. I almost said 7, which I know we made fun of 7 in our first episode as a sort of a non-committal score. But this...
Listen, if you give a movie a 7, we have to have a whole separate episode about it, because that is the holy grail of this show, is to find an actual 7 out of 10 movie.
This one feels really close. I feel like the closest almost you can get to being a 7 out of 10 movie is something like this, where it's like, didn't make enough egregious errors or mistakes or offensive in any way, but still fell short of being a great film or great for what it is. So this one's close. I was between 6 and 7. I'm going to say 6 for Soldier, though. I do appreciate it, though. It's a strong 6.
That's a strong 6.
Yeah.
It had 7 in its sights, but it couldn't get there.
Yeah, well, it had no depth perception after the beginning of the films.
Okay, so that's Double Impact is a 4 out of 10. Soldier is a 6 out of 10. Oh, that means I win.
Oh, you do. Good for you.
I did. We're tied now on number of wins, because I think the films you picked won episodes 1 and 2, and now I won episodes 3 and 4.
Cool. All right.
Let me see where that puts us for total scores, though, because again, on Meet Your Double Feature, we care about who wins the day, but this is about who wins the war. So collectively, across 4 episodes, we've watched 4 movies each. The total review scores, which I guess would be a total out of 40 at this point. If you earned a 4, you'd be at 23 points. And if I got a 6, I'd be at 25 points. So still pretty close in the season 1 rankings overall.
Yeah. Anybody's game.
Anybody's game, which really could have easily not been the case 4 episodes in. This could have been very stratified by now, but we're still close.
Yeah.
I mean, going into this week, we were tied, so that's pretty fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Unintentionally, just for the record.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we're not gaming the scores for drama. We actually just... Okay, let's take a look then at our recommendations for episode 5 of the show. Again, we're still in our forgotten 90s theme. Because I won the episode today, I guess I go first. So your pick, Frank, for next time is going to be 1992's Deep Cover, starring Lawrence Fishburne and Jeff Goldblum.
Oh, that's an interesting duo.
Guess what? That's the only thing I know about the movie. I saw that it had those two in it. I think it's something about crime. I don't know, but I like the idea. I like the idea of those two as an on-screen pairing as 2 leads. I think Jeff Goldblum's the bad guy. And that just sounds interesting. It has good reviews, so it's not like a Hail Mary. I think this one, I'm confident, will be pretty good.
I don't know if I've ever seen Jeff Goldblum. I guess he was an antagonist in that one Thor movie, maybe?
Yeah, that was like a comedy antagonist. I think this one might be a more straightforward villain.
The title again, Deep Cover. What was the year?
Deep Cover, 1992. This is another one, too, that maybe is not like completely under the radar. I believe it had a Criterion Collection release, and that's actually part of what drew me to it, is that the Criterion release cover for the film looks awesome. It's just this interesting shot of Lawrence Fishburne covered in like kind of like blue and magenta lighting. It's just very dynamic.
Oh, okay, cool. I mean, I've never heard of it, so that's
close enough. If we forgot it, it's forgotten.
Yeah. Or I think, honestly, isn't the rule just that we've never seen it?
Well, that's the rule for the show, is that we haven't seen it, but the vague premise for season 1 is just somewhat overlooked films from the 90s. And I think this counts.
Totally. Okay, Deep Cover.
Okay, how about you?
I got nothing, so let me Google.
I forgot you said you didn't have one ready. Okay, this is
literally nothing.
A thrilling look behind the scenes. I can't believe you don't have a list. I have like 20 movies written down already that I could recommend.
Dude, I have no memory of this place, okay? We stop recording and I just just walk away from it all.
I give you a call on Discord every 2 weeks and you're like, oh, I wonder what he wants to talk about. And I'm like, no. I'm going to leave this all in, by the way.
No.
Welcome back from what I believe was a fade out, fade back up now that Frank has found his film for episode 5.
We'll see. Leave it all in. How long did that take? 5 minutes on the clock? I think I did it in under 5. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll just make the audience wait for 5 uninterrupted minutes while you figure it out.
Yeah. Good. Just build the
post-credit scene.
Yeah. Okay, I got one.
Okay, next time on Meet Your Double Feature. What am I watching?
1996, Everyone Says I Love You. A musical romantic comedy directed by Woody Allen.
Okay. That is a pick. We talked about how sometimes we pick like virtually the same type of movie, but something tells me that Deep Cover and whatever that title is you just said are not going to be anything alike.
Well, stay tuned. Will somebody get their eye ripped out or something like this week?
All right, I, to my knowledge, have never seen a film made by Woody Allen.
I don't think I have either. I really do not think I've seen a single one of his films.
I think that's because despite being a very influential filmmaker, by the time we were coming up into choosing movies to watch, the prevailing sentiment about Woody Allen is that he's kind of a creep. So
yep.
I haven't felt like compelled to go back and watch any of those films. But that does make it a blind spot. So what did you say it's called?
It's called Everyone Says I Love You.
Musical romantic comedy. I mean, I like the idea of it. So tune in next time when we discuss the intricacies of how good the movie is versus how good of a person Woody Allen is. Spoiler, it's not very.
Not good. This movie has an interesting cast, so you have that to look forward to.
Yeah. If they forgive him, I forgive him.
Well, I mean, slow down.
It's so funny because the funny thing is too, I don't know what he's done. I genuinely don't know what the
allegations
are.
Oh, I have an idea.
About Woody Allen's behavior.
I have an idea of what he's done. But
he's just on a corkboard of like unmentionables.
I thought you were gonna say he's on a list. He's just on a list. It's fine.
He's just on a list. He has to introduce himself when he moves into the neighborhood. All right, I'm excited. Tune in 2 weeks for a controversial episode of Meet Your Double Feature.
A very special episode.
Very special episode, yeah. Awesome. Okay, that's a good pick. Thanks so much for joining me today, and we will see everyone in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Can't keep doing that. It's delayed. Bye.
Coming up next, it's Deep Cover, followed by Everyone Says I Love You on Meet Your Double Feature.